Hi, everybody. Thanks for having me. So what I wanted to talk about was sort of my journey and how my growth has been more organic. And so we started in 2002, and pretty much how we first started was doing craft shows and doing wholesale and kind of working and building a community that way. And then what we realized was that we were starting to get more of an international audience. And so around 2004, I started selling online, which was really early for online. It was kind of, it was difficult back then. I did everything from scratch, did learn how to do coding, and I wouldn't recommend that. It's just, you lose brain cells doing that. Now you have, sites like Shopify and Squarespace and Etsy that can kind of help you build your website much easier. And so I started really early on. And one thing that I noticed was, this was before social media. I know it's hard to imagine for those of you who are young that there was a life before social media. And so what I did was I started writing a blog, and it started off just sort of more of a journal, kind of like trying to figure out what I was doing with my ideas, and then talking a bit about my personal life and things like that. And what I find that kind of helped with that was that I was sort of integrating my social media, my blog, with my website. And I find those two things are interconnected. I don't think that you can have one without the other. I honestly, and I think that's what all the stuff that Sean was talking about is about pulling those things together, using ads and things like that. So there is a connection between trying to connect what you're doing with what you're selling. You can't just open up a website and just expect people to kind of flock. It's just not going to happen, even the people who are most established. And so when Facebook came around, and with Instagram, Facebook was really great until they started wanting money from you. And so they started hiding all of your posts and not really getting you as much engagement because, they wanted to make some money, which is understandable. And so the platform that I find works the best for me is on Instagram. And I think I'm just going to pull up my Instagram here so you can kind of see it for those of you who don't know my work. So you could see that I have a pretty big followership. I have like 230,000, and everything was a complete organic growth. So don't look at that number and go, holy crap, how am I going to ever get close to that? And I started on Instagram probably 2009. So I've been on there for a pretty long time. And what I try and do, just refreshing because I just posted about my new book. What I try to do that I found that's worked really well with my Instagram is it's a combination of what I'm selling and as well as what I'm trying to teach, because what I'll talk to you about in a bit is about trying to figure out who your audience is. One of the things that I also want you to try and do, so I wanted to kind of mention as well, if you have any questions at any point, feel free to ask, because sometimes I might go on to a different subject, and if you have a question, feel free to ask. One of the things that I found with my audience that I discovered was that they were also makers like me, and because I teach, I wanted to kind of create a teaching component. So the videos have been really popular. So this is also, in a way, it's promoting my new book. So this video here is to promote, the mending book that I'm doing, and I'm showing them something that's really, really simple. And one of the things that I remember talking to people when they first start out on doing social media is they think that whatever they're doing is not going to be of any interest to their audience. And you would be surprised what people find interesting. I mean, because you do what you do, you feel like you have a full knowledge of what it is. But you have to understand that the people who follow you have absolutely no knowledge of what you're doing. I mean, I will even show something really basic this is a running stitch. I mean, a running stitch, if you sew, is the most basic stitching ever. And here I'm basically showing a video of process. So there's 63,000 views of people watching me paint. And, and it's a time lapse. And that's one of the things that I've discovered that works really well in videos, because people have a natural curiosity. So you have a photo, they're gonna go through it, they're gonna skip through it really quickly. But there's something about a video that really holds their attention because of our natural curiosity to know how something starts and then ends. And so that's something that I've noticed really kind of, you know, pulls them in. And so here I am in this next picture showing the final result because people love to see the sort of beginning, the end. And then what that does is, I'm just gonna close this. What that does is it creates a kind of dialogue with your audience. It's creating a story. And so that's what you're trying to do, is you're trying to show aspects of your craft, of your art. And what you're doing is you're taking them along this journey. And when you do that, what happens is they become invested in you. They become invested in your journey. They know about you when they don't really know about you. They know aspects of you, and then why they keep following you and why they keep continuing to support you is because they basically enjoy what they're seeing and what they're doing. And so what you want to do with social media is you don't want to use it in a way where it's like, buy me, buy me, buy me. Because after a while, especially now since the pandemic, I've actually stopped using mailing lists, because what happens is people are getting buying fatigue, because every business is like desperate for customers, because, you know, people are struggling, because, you know, people are out of work, and there's all these things happening in the world. And the last thing people want to do is buy. And so I stopped doing mailing lists. And what I've been doing that's been working really well is on my stories, there's this timer that you can put. And I've been doing these timers, and what happens is it's my way of saying, here I am, this is what I'm selling, this is when I'm selling it. You click on it, you do it, it's your own, it's kind of like their own decision to come and connect with me when I do my shop update, rather than my email list basically pushing it down their throat saying, here, buy me, buy me, buy me. And so what you want to do with your social media is combine, because, you know, everyone's end goal is to make a living. And so you have to figure out how is it that you're doing it and what path that you're taking. And I find that with us as makers, what people are really interested in is our process, right? And I'm not saying, you know, you should show things that are maybe, you know, really unique to yourself. And I mean, I keep a lot of that to myself, but you want to show bits of it, because what happens is they become more interested in your piece. So if like you're working on a painting, maybe show some process of, you know, how you get it started, even just talk about what your inspiration is, all those things that maybe you don't feel that is something that people are interested in. You'd be really surprised what people be interested in. I mean, people are even interested in me opening up a box. I mean, like, that's not that interesting, but people get excited. It's that ASMR, the sound of the paper, and they have the same anticipation as you do of opening and seeing what's inside. And so that's what you're trying to do with your posts, is you're trying to create that anticipation. The one thing that I also wanted to emphasize too is that when you're selling online, it makes you reach a larger audience. And so I sell all over the world. I mean, like Australia, Asia, everywhere. And my biggest market would be the US. I would say about 85% of my market is in the US. And partly it's because the US are more accustomed to buying online. You know, they have the Amazon, and they're used to that kind of convenience. And in Canada, they're a little bit more conservative, because they're not as used to buying things online. They like to look at things and like to touch things. And so what you want to try and do is, when you're doing your business, you want to do a combination of a lot of different things. And like I said, when I first started, I did a lot of wholesale and craft shows, and now I don't do any of that. So the only thing I rely on is online. And the only type of social media that I really focus on is Instagram. And I have never done any paid ads at all. I've done everything as complete organic growth. And I monitor everything. I don't have anybody else who does it, because I feel like it's really my voice. And I don't feel that having somebody, you know, run it would really be good. And I try to engage. One of the things that I try to do is I try to engage in my followers. I will do my best to respond to every question, every comment. And somebody said to me before, they're like, well, I feel like it's so repetitive. I go, yeah, but you know, if let's say you're following somebody and they, you know, you admire what they do, and they respond back with even like liking the post, liking your comment, or giving you like a smiley face emoji or something, what that impact it does. And what I've noticed is that the people that I'm engaging in, those people are my customers as well, because they like the fact that you took the time to respond to their comment and to engage in them. And what you're doing is you're valuing them. And by valuing them, they feel like when they're buying from you, they're like buying from a friend, not just buying from a faceless company. And so as a hand maker, that is your biggest commodity. It's you as a maker. The reason why they're buying from you is because they like you and what you make. They're not buying from a faceless company because they don't know their story. And what was really interesting was when we were doing our work, and there was a certain point in the economy, especially in the US, where it was really starting to not do well. And somebody said to me, your biggest market is the US, and you're going to notice like a huge drop in sales because they're doing really crappy with their economy. I think this was like in the 90s or something. And then what I noticed was there was like actually an increase in sales. And what was happening was that people were making less money, but they were being more cautious of where they were spending it. So they weren't going to go to the big box stores and buying their things. They were going to hand makers because they wanted to support a small business. And then that in the 90s started the handmade revolution. And then now it's become like super huge and big. And so I think that that's one thing that you have to really understand is that, it doesn't really matter what kind, like the market that you have, just kind of nurture it, because those people I find are very devoted. I mean, every time I have a shop update, I would say there's about 20% return customers, which I think is a really huge percentage. And like sometimes I'd be wondering, like this is one woman who buys from every shop update, and I think to myself, what is she doing? And we would joke around and say, maybe she's opening up her own buco shop or something. And then one day I just asked her, because I felt really strange asking her, but she said, oh, every time I see something you make, she goes, I just buy it, and I have like a whole closet full of gifts. And so when I need a gift, I know where to get it, and I don't have to so it's interesting, some people's habits. But anyways, those are kind of things that you should, sort of think about. The other thing too that you want to think about is what you sell, what you make. And knowing your audience and knowing their buying patterns is really important to figure out what it is that you make. So one of the things that I've noticed that are very covetable with my work is the things that are one-offs, right? So I started doing these patchwork pieces as a means to kind of use up my waste. And then it was also for me very relaxing to do, because I do a lot of production work, which means I'm making like hundreds of the same thing, which is really uninteresting. And so I started doing the patchwork because it was a way for me to take a break for a few hours a day. And then those pieces have become really covetable. And so because everyone knows that those are one-of-a-kind pieces. And so when I have a shop update, what I do is I try to coordinate that with selling other things. So I'm polling the audience because I know that they want this particular thing, but then I'm also selling other things. And so it's a way of kind of polling people and then spreading out what it is that you're doing. And I always sell out of everything that I sell during updates, which is kind of incredible. Like, I mean, it was funny. Somebody asked me in an interview what they thought the most successful thing was that I've ever done, as a business. And I said, to make a living as a hand crafter. I mean, like that in itself is a huge accomplishment. And so those patchwork pieces was understanding what my audience liked and what they wanted to do. But the other thing is you have to also try to balance who you are, because one of the things that I started doing that was really popular was punch needle. And I would say a good majority of the people who follow me would probably want me to post punch needle every day. But the thing was, I felt like there was other aspects of my practice that I feel were just as important. And so I'm balancing everything. So it is a matter of knowing what your audience likes, but then also you have to balance what it is that you want to do, because you can't constantly be feeding the audience, because eventually what happens is you start to get tired and you start to feel kind of empty about it, and you have to enjoy it as much as you want to give. And that's a huge part, I think, is that all the stuff that Sean talked about, doing all the sort of technical things behind the scene, and as well with what I do, you have to, the whole crux of it is that you have to really enjoy it and you want to do it. So if you really are into all the technical aspects of what Sean was talking about, there's a lot of, interesting things about that you can really grow and expand your business from. But if you're more into the organic growth, you have to also just understand that you can't feel like when you go to post on social media, or if you design a product, that you feel that it's just for the business. You have to do it for yourself first, and then it kind of expands from that. And I think that that's one of the takeaways that my audience sees, is that I really enjoy what I do. And I think that if you don't enjoy what you're doing, all the other things that you have to do to build your business is just going to feel like work, right? My demographic, I would say, is mostly women. I would say 95% women, and they're 24 to 60 years old. And a lot of them are makers themselves. And if they're not makers themselves, most of them are educated. So, when I look at the US market, and, a lot of people are losing jobs, but a lot of the people who are losing their jobs are not the people who are my customers, because a lot of my customers, they were able to still work from home and still be able to do things. And so when the pandemic hit, I actually didn't really notice any decline in sales, because my customers were still there and still working and still functioning. And so I would say that a good majority of my customers, like I said, are based in the US, based on the sales. And then there's also the problem with selling across the ocean is, of course, with shipping costs. And so what I try and do is also, I've learned from doing online for so long, that I don't give people inexpensive shipping. I have to do like the most expensive with the tracking and the insurance, because it's for my own peace of mind as well as their peace of mind. Because I've learned in the past where if you try to send things cheaply because you want them to save money, in the end you're going to lose out. And so I just feel like if you want to buy it, then you have to pay the money for it, and that's just the way it is. But yeah, that would be my demographic for sure. And I think that's just from engaging with them too, finding out where they are. And then I also, when I start to see new faces pop up, I look on their social media pages too. And that's a good way to kind of figure out who your audience is, because you can see what they're doing and what their interests are. One of the things that I did notice an increase in were knitters. There was a lot of knitters that started following me, probably because my work is, textile based and things like that. And the one thing that I noticed about buying behaviors with knitters, because I've done craft shows with knitters, is that knitters spend a lot of money. And the reason why is because they're used to it. So if you think about it, if they were to make a sweater, they would need about 9 to 10 balls of yarn. And if they wanted to get these people are not knitters who buy yarn from Michaels. These people are buying yarn from like hand makers who are dyeing it themselves and using local yarn and things like that. And they're spending about $40 a skein of yarn. So for them to make a sweater, it's between like $400 or $500. So that's like a lot of money that they're investing in. And then also they're a certain type of person, because who has that time to sit around and knit a sweater? Like, they have a lot of disposable income because they have all this time to knit. And so I started making bags for knitters, and they were like my most popular bags, because my bags, are averaging like, between $70 to $100. And so for someone who's buying $500 sweaters, $100 is nothing to spend. And they like to have a bag for every project that they're doing. So it's kind of an interesting customer base. And so I've noticed, and then I did my first, I remember knitting show in Vancouver. It's called Knit City. And I have never seen anything like it. Like, I literally had people run to my booth, and like, I had people grab bags from each other's arms. It was like this crazy frenzy. And I was just like, knitters are like insane. So anybody who knows the knitting community, it's just, they're really diehard about like the different products and yarns and things like that. But anyways, that was an interesting thing to kind of discover as a demographic. And that was basically, you know, you look at the people who follow you and you usually know the kind of person they are because of the handles that they use, the names. And so all these handles had these like knit, the word knit related. So I started to notice a lot of that. And I was like, oh, there's a ton of knitters here. And so anyways, that's kind of the thing you have to do, is you have to research who they are too. It's not just a matter of sitting there and doing your social media and then just not really paying attention to who's coming and who's not. And so the other thing too is if you have even like, you know, 500 followers or 1,000 followers, understand that the percentage of the people, that's a huge percentage of people who are interested in your work already. I have a lot of followers, but a lot of them are lurkers, you know, or bots. I don't know what they're, but how do I describe this with social media, especially with Instagram? When you have a huger following, it's actually the percentage of what people see your work is actually lower than someone with less followers. So if you have 1,000 followers, the percentage of people seeing your work is probably like around 70%, which is huge, right? Whereas me, with someone with 230,000 followers, I probably have 1% of the people who are following me seeing my work. And you could see that in the insights and the analytics and stuff. So don't feel that you have to have a ton of followers, because you don't. I don't look at growth of numbers anymore. I sort of more look at the I guess the value that the people I already have, and kind of nurture that. And so I'm not concerned with growing that number, because it's just a number. It doesn't really mean anything to me. It's more the people that I already have there, because I have a lot of repeat customers. And so you have to kind of think of things differently. And then you also want to really work on the content that you're producing. You want to make sure, you know, I'm sure Sean talked about branding, or you guys have gone over branding a bit. But you really should try to understand what it is that you do, and how your work looks and how your work comes across on all your platforms, with your social media, your website. All those things are so important, because what it does is it creates consistency, and people naturally love consistency. And so if I post a really dark photo in my feed, people are thrown off. They're like, what the heck, you know, because my feed is very bright and airy. Everything I've done is completely organic. So this here, I don't know if you guys just noticed that I use this thing called Linktree in my profile. And the Linktree is really great. I should actually change that. I forgot about the shop update thing. So what it does is Linktree, it gives you, it's a free platform. And I started using it because people be like, oh, I want to buy this, I want to buy that. So I put the most most popular things in the Linktree. And what that does is it avoids them going to the homepage of the website. It takes them directly to the actual item. And I found that helps a lot. And then also Linktree has analytics to show you, where people go and how that works. So I use Shopify. I had a partnership with Shopify a really long time ago, which I don't think anybody is able to do right now. And so they were kind of desperate for customers at the time. So I got really lucky. And so I negotiated a monthly fee of $9.99 with no sales. They don't take any of my sales, percentage of my sales. I know you guys are upset about that, but I think they were at the time wanting 2-point-something% of whatever sales you made. And so I said to them, I want to pay this amount. I want to have discount codes. I want to have this. That's it. And and they were okay with that. And so my sort of package with them is grandfathered in, so they can't ever change it. So this website here that I have with Shopify, I try to keep it really clean. I try to change these pictures every so often, and I chose these ones. They're actually things I don't even make to sell, and the reason why I have them up there is because they're very colorful and they're visually eye-catching. And so when you come down, it shows the different items. These are just the highlights of the project, and then a bit about our business, and then of course promoting the book, and just more pictures of the business itself. And then at the bottom, just just some more information. So what I like about this site is that it really keeps with, it keeps with the actual look of my site, and I'm trying to get to it, but my Wi-Fi is really slow. And I do all my own photography. And the reason why I did a lot of things when I first started my business was because I didn't have any money to pay for these things. And I wanted to be self-reliant. I didn't want to rely on a photographer. I didn't, you know, because with an online business, you can make a product right away and then post it online really easily. And I just didn't want to kind of, you know, worry about that. And the other thing, I don't know if you noticed too, is I sell in US dollars because I was telling you I have like a huge percentage of customers in the US. If I place my prices in Canadian dollars, it actually will look more because our, you know, the number of, because our, it does cost more for Canadian than US. And so the number looks higher. And so it kind of deters customers. And the reason why I sell in US dollars is because US dollars is like an international currency. And a lot of the supplies that I purchase are from the US. And so I have to make in US currency or else I'm going to be losing money when I'm buying like my leather or my fabric or my hardware. So those are the kind of things that you should kind of consider. If you're happy with the Canadian value that you're asking for, you know, to the US customers, it'll be actually cheaper for them. So it actually is great if you can try to tap into the US market for your work. To date, probably the most expensive thing that I've ever sold online would be like a quilt that I did. And it was like $5,000. But what I've started doing was I started selling my punch needle pieces, which take a little bit more time. And so because they're one-offs, they're pretty covetable. And so those are the things that I'm starting to sell, and they've all kind of sold. And so on my my website, I started a section called Originals, and so these are the different pieces, and they've all sold. So these are all one-offs, and they're not like part of the production pieces. So those are the things that I'm trying to sell, and I'm trying to do one a week. So I'm working on one right now. And same thing, it's more for me, you know, like to kind of do as a break from all the production work. So I try to have a combination of that. And so how to get people to start to buy more expensive things is you just have to kind of present it as something that is a little bit more harder to get. Like you're not making like 100 of them, you're making like 1 or 2 of them. And the thing that I've realized with selling online for so long is that there is money out there. You just have to tap into the right sort of market for that. Like honestly, when I started putting those one-off pieces up, I didn't think anything of it. I was like, I'm going to put them up. If they sell, they sell. If they don't, it's not a big deal. And literally within 15 minutes, like the ones that I had listed, I think like about a dozen of them, they all sold. And so that was like a complete shock. So it made me realize that people do want it. Like, I think that, you know, you have to also look at some people who like maybe buy your production work and then they love your stuff, but they don't really need another bag or something. So they want something else maybe to decorate their home. So those are kind of the things you have to think about with what people are buying. They might want to, you know, invest into something a little bit more. The other thing that I wanted to kind of mention, I think I went over a lot of the things that I wanted to say, but one of the things that I wanted to mention too, as makers, you have a talent to do things, and I don't think that you should try to limit yourself on just doing, you know, one type of thing. Like if you're doing originals, only do originals, you would never do production, or if you do production work, not do originals. Just try to feel that your work expands over like a huge, broad, you know, area of things, and that maybe you can take your original painting and make, you know, cards from them or posters and things like that. And it doesn't devalue you as a maker. It just makes you grow. And the thing that you have to understand is that when you put things out there on social media, or when you expand in your range of your work, what you're doing is you're creating connections with other people, connections with other businesses. And the things and the decisions that you make can lead to other things. And so you're not going to know those possibilities if you're not going to try them. And that's the same with, you know, doing ads or working on doing your social media and stuff like that, you're going to reach, you know, like a bigger audience. Like when I wrote my first book, when I got my book deal, it was from somebody who followed me. Like the publisher was following me and they were seeing what I was doing. And so there's people behind the scenes that are looking at you and seeing what you're doing, and you never know what we would be putting out there. And when I was asked to do the mending book from the same publisher, it was just something I did for my kids. You know, my kids like their things, and I would show videos and pictures of me fixing like one of their knees or something like that. And then my publisher contacted me and said, how do you feel about doing like a mending book? I was like, yeah, sure. And then I wanted to add other things, and the conversation started. So you don't really know what's going to happen with anything. So you have to put it out there. You have to just stay connected, right? And I think it's a good way to kind of grow your business. I think that when you're in this, you want to be a maker, you want to make a living as a maker, you have to understand that you're in it. So you either put all of it in it or not. And then I feel like as makers and as self-employed people, we get what we put out there. So if you put a lot out there, you're going to get more than if you don't put as much out there. I think that with the blogging, I mean, I've always was showing sort of aspects of what I was doing and bits of who I was. And so when you're presenting yourself, you know, you're presenting a certain dialogue. And I think that the book was conceivable because it was almost like taking the words that I was writing and then also the pictures, and they can kind of see that vision already before I could see that vision. And so I think that that's what you want to try and do is when you're presenting yourself is to really kind of keep it very, you know, like almost like you are, whatever vision you have that you see, you almost want to put it out there so that it could get to that point. I don't know if that makes any sense. And so whenever I was posting or putting pictures and things like that, I always did envision seeing something like that in some type of book form, almost like a compilation of everything that I was doing. And definitely the book that I'm working on now is more of a compilation of all the things that I'm interested in, as opposed to with the punch needle when it's more of a really like specific technique. And then I wanted to kind of mention something too with the punch needle. I actually did a video. It was a very simple, basic video that actually went viral on Instagram. It got like over 500,000 views. And I think overnight I gained something like 30,000 followers. It was really kind of insane. And it was just a simple, basic video. There was no talking. And I was just showing how the tool worked. It was the most insane thing. And I started getting messages from people all over the world, like asking what this thing was. And it's something that's been around for, you know, since 1800. So it's nothing new. And the woman who sold the tool, I remember approaching her before I did the video, asking her if she could send me some things for free. And she was just like, I don't know who you are. You're in Canada. She just thought she didn't even know. She's like a grandma in Vermont. She didn't even know what Instagram was. She's like, I don't know what this Instagram thing is. And you want me to give you free stuff? And she just thought it was weird. And I'm like, okay, whatever. And so we kind of, you know, she had something to do. And she said, yeah, I'll email you later. She kind of brushed me off. And then I just like, okay, whatever. I'll just do the video. And then she like overnight made more money the week that I posted the video than her entire year of business. And I think her business had increased 645% or something ridiculous. Wow. So, I mean, the power of social media, it's insane. And so she didn't really understand what the whole idea of viral is. And so anyway, she's doing amazing now with her tools. And then of course, you know, I got to write the book. I got to travel the world to tour the book. So it was just all from a video. I mean, like, so I guess what I'm trying to say is that you never know what's going to happen out there. You just got to put it out there. I'm a workaholic. I remember when we were having this conversation before the talk, someone had said to me on social media, it's like making me feel like what we're doing as makers we're hobbyists, and that it's not like a real job. And like I was saying how, you know, this is my job, so I'm going to really try to excel at it rather than, you know, just kind of, you know, do bits and pieces here. And so, yeah, so my output's high because this is all I do. I mean, this is my job. So, and also I am a workaholic, so I should mention that. So like, you know, when Sean was talking, I was doing like 3 different things while he was talking. So it's not like I was just sitting here listening to Sean. So I'm trying to always kind of keep busy and trying to keep doing things. And so, yeah, that's why my output's really high. And yeah, we do everything ourselves. We do all the making, the packaging, the mailing. We do everything ourselves. We don't have any, like, I have my mom that helps me sew. So one of the things that I did notice during the pandemic was a lot of people who were similar makers as me, where they had a huge, like they had a huge amount of staff, and they had things contracted out to be sewn, and you know, they had staff of like 10, 15, things like that, and all those businesses closed because they weren't able, for, you know, 6 months or so, weren't able to get to work, weren't able to, you know, social distance, and so the businesses failed. And then what we realized is, because we've done everything on our own, small business, didn't have a bunch of employees, we were able to kind of keep going during the pandemic. So we were actually really lucky in that sense, that we didn't have a huge amount of staff that we had to, like, you know, pay. And so I noticed a huge amount of people, even people who I was really quite shocked that they would close, like people who were making millions and millions of dollars a year. And you're thinking, how are you, you know, and they have a huge following and they have people buying their stuff. But the thing was, with the pandemic, the buying habits change, and there's probably going to affect us in the future too, how people are buying differently. And because we're you know, artisans, we are at the bottom of the list of things that people want to buy, right? We're not a necessity. And so those are the things that we're going to have to be looking at and adapting. And I think that's great that you guys are taking this course so that you can be educated on how to kind of, you know, reestablish your sites and your work and things like that, because we have to constantly be changing in order to adapt to all the things that are changing around us, for sure. I offer workshops online. I did a series of workshops on this company called Creative Bug, which you guys should check out. It's really cool. You can get a free membership, and it's kind of like Netflix, but with craft classes. It's kind of cool. And they always come up with new ones. And they do a thing where they use this company called Share a Sale. And so every time somebody purchases my workshop or views my workshop, I get paid a royalty. So every month I get this check, which is kind of nice. And then I'm also working with this company. They're a Spanish company. You might see a lot of their ads on YouTube, but the company's called Domestika. And they're based in Spain. Their site is mostly Spanish, but they got bought out by a US tech company. And so now they are trying to push more English speaking workshops. And so that has been put on hold because they wanted us to film in Spain, and right now there's travel restrictions. And so we're just working on the text and the info and behind the scene. And then as soon as it's safe to travel, I'll go and be doing that. And they have a really good deal. They do the same thing. You get a percentage of the sales that people buy your classes, and they have a really high production. So I've been trying to kind of get on. My kids are bothering me to get onto YouTube. They love YouTube, but I just find, for me, you know, I'm not a very tech savvy person, and to do a video, I want to do a good quality video, and I have a lot of issues with not really filming the video, but more editing it. And so I'd really like to kind of start doing more, because it's great to do these quick videos on Instagram, but you know, it would be good to get onto a platform like YouTube when you're doing like how-to videos, because then at least eventually you get paid. Crafter's Box, I get paid with royalties for that as well. So there's a lot of royalties. It was actually really good because when the pandemic first started, I was like really worried about money. And then like my royalty check from my book came and some other stuff. I'm like, oh, thank goodness for royalties. And that's probably a whole other conversation that we were talking about before, is licensing your work and working with other companies, because that's a good way to kind of get revenue, especially as artists and designers. It's a good way to kind of get your work out there without you actually producing the work. And the more you can get out there, you can get a really good income a month from that. Like there's this girl who does really well on, she's an illustrator, American illustrator, Lisa Congdon, and she does Creative Bug and all these other places. And she gets a lot of royalties just from all her different things that she does. And like, I mean, that would be like my goal as I get older, because producing stuff, it's hard work, as you know, those of you who produce things every day. I guess for me, it's what you personally would like. Like if I go on someone's social media, I don't want to see like hundreds of pictures of their kids. I don't want to hear long stories about things because I just don't have the time to kind of read it. So I feel like those are the kind of things I'm not interested in. So if I'm not interested in those things, then those are not the things that I'm going to put out there. And when it came to my children, I only wanted to put out things that were things that they were making that were art and craft related, which turned my daughter into kind of a bit of a Instagram celebrity. Like people love her and everything that she makes because they've been seeing what she's been producing since she was like really little to like now. And I found that when I would write something really personal, like when I was, when I was addressing certain things that were happening in the media, to do with the social injustice or even just like immigration and things like that, I would write about my personal story about it. And those probably got the hugest amount of likes and engagement because I'm so sparingly putting out my personal information and my personal story. It kind of has a bigger impact. So I feel like if it's something where you're sharing so much all the time, the impact becomes a little bit less strong. So if it's something that you're sharing and it has to do with your work, then I think that makes complete sense because it has to do with what it is that you're making. So because what I'm making is very much just, products and things like that, there isn't really a personal story that goes with that unless it's something specific. So I try to share it sparingly. Also because, being on social media, it is a bit kind of strange because people know so much about you, nothing about them. And so you do want to kind of share as little as possible. You don't want to share too much personal information. For the longest time, I never wanted to talk about going on vacation because then I thought, okay, if I go on vacation, then people know that no one's at home. It's just kind of a weird thing. And sometimes I'll say things like, oh, I'm on vacation, but my mom's at the store, watching my store or something like that, because I just feel like it's just too much personal stuff out there. But I think it's hard not to share your personal story because when you're making your work and you're sharing it, your work is pretty much who you are. And so it's hard not to do that. But for me, I just feel like I go to people's pages to see the work and to hear a bit about it. And I don't want to hear everything all the time. And so I try to do what it is that I'm interested in. So that's why I do what I do. I feel like I do a lot of different things, but there is a cohesion, right? Because it's all mostly textile based. So if you're dealing with different materials, it's going to have a different look and feel. I feel like you should approach marketing them all the same way. I don't think there should be any sort of differentiation because you do one thing or the other. I think what you should try and do is like maybe on your social media platforms, you can maybe focus 1 week on a particular medium, and then another week, another medium, and then try to integrate some of that together. I don't feel like you should, open up separate accounts or open up separate websites. Like the one example that Sean showed, the woman who does a lot of photography and then had the jewelry. Like I think, I think the commonality to the work itself is maybe the way you present it, like the way you take the photographs. They have a nice, clear, photographs to them. They don't look different in that way. And I think that the way you present each one, if they're similar, they're going to read as something that is cohesive to what it is that you're doing. And I think that it's great that if you have a wide range, different body of work, I think that makes you a lot more, able to kind of reach different audiences. But I feel like also you don't want to get overwhelmed with too much. I feel like what you should do is look at the pieces that are working well and that are strong and really focus on them. I would say like a handful of different types of pieces. I feel like if you want to experiment and try different things, there's nothing wrong with that. And you could show that and do like an update with just this special collection of things, and then maybe you're moving on to something else. I feel like sometimes if you're going to show it all on the same platform, what happens is if you have so much, the audience becomes really confused, and then it becomes like too much for them to kind of handle. So for me with my work, it always kind of falls down to like really the main crux of my work is like the screen printing and the patterning. And so everything else that I do is kind of like in support of that. So what you want to do is maybe have a few really strong pieces that people respond really well to, they're buying it, and then and then add the other pieces as more like updates or like, you know, special things, and then move on to other things and not put so much emphasis on them, because I feel like people need to have a core understanding of what it is that you're about. Because the more they understand what you're about, the more they can kind of attach to things. And if they can't attach to things, then they get really confused. And that's what you don't want, is that confusion. The main takeaway that I wanted to everybody to kind of understand was that I think what you really need to try and do is figure out what your story is, and try to connect that with what you're doing, selling online, because I feel that it doesn't matter which kind of platform works for you, either Facebook or even writing a blog now. You just have to really try to connect those people to what it is that you're doing, and then they will in turn buy something. And I think that that should be a main focus rather than trying to sell all the time. It's like that movie, was it Fields of Dreams? You know, if you build it, they will come, right? So it's kind of like that idea, you know, you're building what it is that you're doing and the sales will come. And then, you know, if you're feeling like you don't know what it is that you want to do, I always say to people, you know, when you're making something, you're doing something, if you like it, someone else will like it, you know? So you have to, the thing that I've been fortunate is trusting my gut and trusting, you know, my decisions. And I think that that's the one thing that we as makers, we're always sort of unsure and insecure about what it is that we're doing. So I think you have to kind of really just say, you know what, I know that's good. I know that that's going to do well. So I have to just go for that and really try to trust your gut and what it is that you're doing. Because, and the reason why I always say don't look at, you know, the followerships and the likes is because the algorithm now, I mean, I was fortunate to be on Instagram before the algorithm, and it was amazing. But now with the algorithm, it's like, it can really mess you up. You could do a great post, you could do a great thing, and then all of a sudden there's crickets out there and you're like, what the heck? And so you have to really just try to focus on the making and the doing, and not focus on the accolades, because it's not going to get you anywhere. My style just got more refined because of experience, right? So if you look at photos that I did 10 years ago, they were horrible because I didn't understand the composition, the lighting and things like that. And so the branding style changed only because of my experience of taking photos every day and just getting better at it. And so you will find what it is that works for you, what's pleasing to your eye. And like, you know, a lot of times if you look at someone's Instagram, there might be a certain coloring that they use. And those are the things that I gravitate towards. So when you're thinking about what your branding style is, it's really your own personal taste and what it is. I wouldn't really try to look at someone else's feed or someone else's work and try to mimic it, because it's not you. You should definitely try to create work and create a photo styling that's very much to your liking. And then that's what makes it unique to you, right? I've been copied by big companies where I've gotten financial compensation for, and I've been copied by my friends, you know, like who were supposed to be my friends, or strangers. So like, it's been all over the place. But the one thing that I've always kept me going about the copying is that, you know, it's going to only last for so long, because they're copying a part of you, and they're not going to get the whole essence of you. And I actually think that copiers make me better, because when I start getting copied for something, I'm like, I think it's time to move on. And so you're going to always be a step ahead of them and should not let it affect you. The only time you get involved with lawyers and things like that is when it's, you know, a big company. But when it's like another maker, they're going to get over it really quickly, you know. And it's just, the only thing you could do is just send them an email and say, I know what you're doing. And then a lot of the times, if they're very, you know, self-conscious about it, they'll stop. And then sometimes they'll keep going, but there's nothing you can do about it. And you waste more time and stress and energy thinking about it, that you should just move on to the next thing.
We had one person on the island who was having this issue of copying. She was doing beaded earrings, and she runs Sunday Lace, which is a bead store in Eskasoni. And what she said was that people were copying anyway, and so she started selling kits for them to remake the same designs and models that she had created. So she kind of leaned into it by showing that she was the trademarker of the process, kind of like I feel like you've done with your books and your workshops. Like, there's no way I'm going to go online and see something that looks like your product and not associate it to you.
Yeah.
And I think it's because you have so much more content around it.
Well, one of the things that was happening really often, and then it's kind of slowed down a bit now, where people were taking my punch needle finished pictures, and then posting it on their Instagram saying, I'm going to do a workshop, but they would be advertising it with my work. And I would contact them and I said, well, how much money did you make for this workshop? I would like, 20% of that because you used my work in order to get those monies. And some people did pay and some people were just like freaked out and they're like, I'm going to take it down. I'm so sorry. I didn't know this wasn't allowed. And so you just have to be a really strong hand about it. Because I've gotten to situations where I've had a friend copy and then, they're friends, you don't really know what to say to them. And then you're kind of wishy-washy about it. And then it just kind of escalates to something like a lot worse. And so I think that you have to be really like sure with your words and like tell them how it is. Like, this is not acceptable. What you're doing is an infringement on my intellectual property and, you need to stop. And if they don't, most times they don't, they'll eventually get caught and move on to something else. But you have to just be sure that you at least know that you've confronted them and really, but I think creating a kit from the copywork is really amazing. I think that's great. There's a video on YouTube that I did with HP, and they did a bit of a studio tour. So it's on there. And I've always post pictures here and there on my Instagram, so you can definitely see it there. And of course, it's, it looks neat. I mean, like back here, it's messy because it's a working studio. But in my photos, it looks neat because I always say that it's neat in front of the camera, but behind the camera, there's like a pile of laundry. So don't think I'm like super neat or clean. It's just like that's just for the photo. But I do try to post it online. And so just to give an idea, so I live in like an old Victorian building in downtown Toronto. So I'm right on a major street. I'm on Dundas Street. And so the front of basically our front door is a shop. And then behind the shop is a sewing area. And that's where my mom is usually working. And then when you go further back, there's a shipping table, and then my printing table, and then what you see behind me is the cutting table. And then upstairs I have I call like a non-production studio. So that's where I do like my painting and drawing and my punch needle. So because I was tired of having a space where I had to constantly clean in order to do something. So I wanted a space where I can just leave things out. And so, and then we live upstairs. And so it's a functioning studio and home. So it works really well. I have 2 kids and we wanted a space like that so that we can work when they're sleeping. And so it's worked well to have this kind of building. Being downtown, it's kind of hard sometimes because, we're near restaurants, so it can get pretty noisy, but I really like it. I think that a lot of people are just naive. Like, they have this idea that everything on the internet's free. So that's one of the questions, that's one of the answers I get a lot. They're like, oh, I found it on Pinterest or I found it on the internet. And I'm like, yeah, but it belongs to somebody. Not only, I said, when you're using someone else's photographs, it's not just the work itself, but it's also the photographer, like photographers don't get enough credit. And so a lot of people are just unaware. And then most of the times when you tell people they become aware and they're really freaked out about it. And they'll stop. But then there's some people who just want to make money, so they don't really care. I used Carfact a while ago when I was like in grad school. I had a membership, but I'm not up to date with Carfact, so I'm not really sure. But Carfact does have a lot of really great information, and I think that they're definitely a great resource for things like copyright and other things like that. But I haven't been a member for so long, so I don't really know what they offer. But they're definitely a good resource for sure. So when I first started making, I actually, I did a lot of teaching. So my background, when I finished school, I wanted to teach at university, and that's what I did. I taught at Sheridan College, and I taught at OCAD University. And so while I was teaching there, I was also teaching art at the Art Gallery of Ontario. I did my business part-time. And I would say probably 5 years into our business, we switched to doing it full-time. And I found that people switching to full-time is probably one of the scariest decisions. But I discovered that it was a really good decision, because what happens is when you eliminate your income, it makes you extremely hungry, and it makes you work really hard to kind of get to a certain level of living off of your income. And what I did in order to kind of build the business was I made sure to have streams of income from as many different places as possible. So I was teaching workshops, I was selling wholesale, I was doing every craft show imaginable, and I did the One of a Kind show for the longest time. I did that show for 17 years. And so that show was like, you know, twice a year, spring and summer. So you can definitely monitor your income based on those two shows. And then, of course, selling online and doing all those different things. And if you have all those different streams of income, you can definitely make a living for sure. And then also everybody's, you know, version of doing well or income is so different from everybody else. I mean, you could be, I mean, I think living in Cape Breton is probably a lot cheaper than living in Toronto. And so, you know, you have to do what is comfortable. And I think if you, in the first few years, if you make enough to kind of cover your expenses and then have a little bit left over to reinvest into your business, I think that that's great. I think that that's successful. I don't think you need to make $1 million a year in order to be successful. You just have to be able to have growth in your business. So with Instagram, I find for me, it works the best because, you know, we're makers. So we're visual, right? So that is the best platform for that visual without all that extra clutter that Facebook has. But in terms of like demographics, Facebook customers have more money than Instagram. Instagram, you're getting a lot of like millennials and younger people. They don't have any money, right? So there's definitely more money on Facebook. But the problem with Facebook now is that you have to pay to be seen. So you have to look into how you want to kind of invest in doing that. But I found for me, Pinterest has the hugest amount of, what's the word? Maybe shamano. Like there's a lot of people that come from Pinterest, but there isn't a huge conversion from Pinterest. So the people who are coming from Pinterest are not buying stuff. So there's something about Pinterest that I haven't really put my kind of finger to it, but there's something about it that they're offering that's really good. So they offer a huge amount of traffic, but the people aren't buying. So I don't know how you can make that connection to take those customers to buy because I haven't figured it out. I don't know if Sean knows anything about that. But anyways, that's what I found with those different platforms. Twitter, never mind, you know, because we're not going to be saying witty things. I don't have a Twitter account. And then I find like you have to figure out what works best for you. But I personally think as makers, I think Instagram is the way to go. And the reason why Instagram is good too is that they have their like stories, which I think are really great stories, just so people know if they don't know a lot about stories on Instagram. Those are real time. So it doesn't get affected by the algorithm. So stories get seen in real time. Which are very useful. And then of course they have their IGTV, and then they came out with this thing called Reels, which is kind of similar to TikTok. And the thing that you have to understand about Instagram is that they like to promote things that are new. So if you do Reels right now, you're gonna get tons of promotion because not everyone's doing it because it's newish. Every time I post a video in IGTV, it gets a huge amount of viewership because Instagram favors videos, and they always like to put that in their what do you call it when you do your search, when you I forget what it's called, you know, when you go to your explore page, they always like to put that up in your explore page. They favor those things over pictures itself. So pictures have a harder amount of viewership than videos itself. But I find like because Instagram has those things, it makes you have a better chance of having your work seen by people that would be interested in your work. Whereas with Facebook, it's a less likely chance. I find Facebook is a little bit more personal because you have the family and the friends aspect. So it doesn't really work really well. And, you know, like your friends and family are not going to be your customer base. So that's sort of my experience with it. And I know that a lot of people have had a lot of success paying for ads on Instagram because but the problem with Instagram ads is they become a bit addictive. So you go and you pay for the ads and it does amazingly well, and then it's like, oh, your next post, and then you look at your bill and you end up spending like $1,000 a month just on ads because it's doing so well, and they make it do well on purpose so that you could come back and spend more money. And so I find doing the ads is always good for like if you have a shop update or something new that you want to promote. I wouldn't really necessarily use those paid advertisements for like everyday posting. I would do it more for when you have a big shop update or a big show coming up or things like that. So I find that my customer base, a lot of them are, they're not all textile based. Like there's a lot of people who are jewelers or painters or ceramic people. And so I think it's just the maker community in general. And I think that they're just like, for me, I follow also a lot of different disciplines. And I think it's just, that's the core of it, is that it's a maker community. And I think that no matter what kind of work that you do, there's always going to be interest in it, because it's about that maker community. So I think that's something that's good to kind of keep in mind, and not feel like this audience is not going to like something or something else. I mean, they definitely will gravitate towards something more strongly than they would something else, and that's fine. You have to kind of gauge that, but they're always going to be interested in what you're doing, because they're invested in you as a maker, not necessarily just everything that you do. Connect with other people that you're interested in. If there's someone whose work that, you know, you feel connected to, or that you like, you know, comment, like, you know, because what happens too, a lot of the times when I get a comment, or if I'm on someone else's feed and I see a comment from somebody that I feel is, you know, a really good comment, I will click on their handle and look at their page. And so if you go out there and just get yourself connected with other people, that's a really good way too, that doesn't cost a lot of money to kind of get your stuff seen. So that's something that you should try. I know I do that all the time. And then also you develop relationships and friendships with people. And I've made friendships with people online that I've never met before. And if I have a question about something, I feel like I could ask them, because we've built this friendship online, and vice versa. They'll ask me questions, and you develop a community that way that's more international, and it kind of helps you expand the growth of what you're doing. And I think that's really good to do.